the children, if you taking a child with you and there's only one parent, you have to have all these kind of new forms now. You have to have affidavits and letters from the parents, and we thought we had all that signed and done out, all the papers, but there was one little stamp missing from from the solicitor. So again, we had to email, fax, and we again just got through. I thought that the journey would be fairly straightforward, going across the border from South Africa to Swaziland. We parked up the car, went into passport control. When we came out, there was a flat tire. There was this kind of Swazi kind of garage owner there says, "Oh, you've got a flat tire." And he said, "Oh, but we can fix it for you." Anyway, they took the tire off, and there was this kind of knife mark in it. And probably they punctured our tire for us, kind of as we were having our passports checked. Finally we're getting towards the place, and the last 45 minutes, the road is just so awful that we can't take our cars there. So we have to go on the back of a pickup truck. And eventually we get one of these kind of Jeeps, and we pile all our stuff, and eventually we get to Bandini. And it was a journey full of adventure, drama, excitement, nail-biting. And in some ways, I think looking at journeys, they do give us a little kind of hint as to what our lives are like, our spiritual lives. And that's why this evening we're going to look at a book of the Bible called Exodus, because the book of Exodus gives us a historical story of God's people and a journey they made from Egypt to the Promised Land, a journey that had adventure, it had daring, it had calamity, a journey that had times of real disappointment and times of real joy, at times of obedience and times of disobedience. But as we read through this story of Exodus, we can learn lessons. In some ways, there's a metaphorical picture as we read the story of these people of God in Egypt who are slaves and how they journey to freedom. And over the last few weeks, we've been looking at some of those things about finding freedom, finding release, finding out who we are. And this evening, we're going to look at how does this story of Exodus, how does that help us think about our spiritual journey, of where we are, and is their journey from slavery, from disappointment to freedom. But before I read the Bible passage, I'm going to get Chris to interview Kadeem, who's going to tell us something about his spiritual journey and his story. So, Chris, over to you, and hopefully Kadeem as well.
Yeah, hopefully Kadeem. Where's Kadeem? Come on, Kadeem. There he is. Great. Do we have another mic? Can I use this one? Can I use this one? Who's going to use this one? Okay, that one, even better. Hi, I'm Chris. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the student team lead. We can't hear Kadeem, that's all right.
Hello.
Much better. So this is Kadeem. He's a third-year student here. I've known him for a little while now. He's studying maths, and he's going to tell us a bit about himself. So Kadeem, come out here into the light a little bit. There you go. You're looking great there. So Kadeem, can you tell us about your background, like upbringing, family, that sort of thing? Where'd you come from?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in a non-believing household. My parents and my brother are atheists. But I had a very nice childhood. My parents are very supportive, very loving, and I had good friends. And I enjoyed going to school. I enjoyed learning, trying new things, and meeting new friends. And I think as I became a teenager, I probably got involved with the wrong kind of friends, and very quickly got involved in a life of gang violence, crime, and just really got pulled in by peer pressure and kind of wanting to feel accepted. And this kind of continued on through my teenage age, and I just got pulled along with it, really. I never really stopped to think about what I was doing. I was just driven by wanting to feel accepted and respected by those around me. And I think all the while, as I was getting older, the level of stuff I was getting involved in was more and more heavy. And I just lost, I just lost all of the good things that I had in my life, really. My relationship with my family really deteriorated. I became really narrow-minded, and I even would go as far to say as I lost my personality. I just started conforming to what was around me and what I thought I should act like.
Cool, thank you. And how did you first encounter the whole kind of Jesus phenomenon?
Yeah. So a couple years later, I got arrested for quite a serious robbery, and I was looking at jail time basically, and this really caused this fast-paced life that I was living to come to a massive halt. And it was the first time in years that I'd actually stopped to think about anything in my life. And I didn't really have anyone to speak to at the time. As I said, my relationship with my family wasn't too good, and I didn't really have any real friends at that time. So I actually had a Bible in my drawer that a friend had given me years before, and kind of not knowing where else to turn, I picked up this Bible and I started reading it. And I didn't really read anything that was specific to my situation, and I didn't read the full gospel, but the glimpse that I did get of what I saw, I put down the book feeling just so much peace over my situation, and I literally was in the worst situation that I'd ever found myself in life. And just after reading it and just after encountering that, I just felt so peaceful, and I really couldn't explain it. But I wouldn't say I became a Christian then, but I'd committed to stop living the life that I had done and read the Bible more to kind of understand exactly what it was I'd come across. And I guess just after about half a year of reading the Bible, I finally came to understand that in Jesus' death, he had met everything. It met my every need. He had provided everything that I was looking for, the satisfaction I was looking for, the acceptance I was looking for. It was all found in him. And I would say it was at that point that the Lord saved me, and he brought me into new life.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks, Kadeem. And so what happened then? What happened next? Like, how have things been since that point?
Yeah, so I would say one of the first things I really noticed after becoming a Christian was he was just so gracious to bless me with restoring so many things in my life. He had really rebuilt the relationship between my parents. I'd become a lot more open-minded again, and I got back a passion for education, which brought me to university in Bristol, which brought me here. But so that first year of university was massive for me in terms of my faith. It was the first time I was kind of learning about and hearing that God wanted to have a relationship with me, and that was massive. And I was growing in with this relationship, but at the same time, there were areas of my life that I weren't letting God into, and I really struggled to let him into. And instead of kind of coming to him in my inability and my weakness, to be honest, I would just fake that part of my life. I would just, when I'm around my Christian friends, I would just make myself want to seem and sound as holy as possible. And I would talk about this relationship in a way that wasn't really real to me. And I think after about half a year of that, really and truly, I just realized, like, God really highlighted to me that I was living the exact same life that I was living before I was saved. I was going out in my own strength to get acceptance from others. And I remember around the same time, someone who was mentoring me showed me a verse at the end of Job. And it says, I'd heard about you by the hearing of my ear, but now I've seen you with my eyes. And that was really powerful to me. When I heard that, it was like, yeah, that's where I am. I've heard about this God and I've caught a glimpse of it, but I want to know him. I want this relationship to be what I make it sound like it is to other people. And I think just through all that, God really brought me to a place where I was just like, do you know what? Like, I'm tired of doing this in my own strength. I'm tired of pretending, and I'm tired of only the frustration of having God in parts of my life and not in other parts of my life. And I think, I just came to a point where I said, you know what, God, I can't do this. I need you to do this. And for me, kind of, since then, I didn't really feel like there and then I had a massive spiritual breakthrough or anything. But kind of reflecting on my time since then, I would say that the biggest thing for me is that I would say that I do now know God, and that's just really freed me up in life. That kind of, as I know him, and I know his personality, I know his character, I know how trustworthy, how faithful he is to me. when I read the same biblical truths and promises that I've been reading since I was a Christian, instead of them being something in my head that I can recite to someone else, they're something in my heart that shows through my actions and the way I live my life. And so it just means that, like, when I read in the Bible that if I put my trust in God, I'll never be put to shame. Or if I read in the Bible that God knows what's best for me, he wants what's best for me, and he'll strengthen me to live this life that is best for me, that just gives me so much freedom and so much peace. And yeah, I can just drop all of the fear, anxiety, and worry and just focus on following him, which is, it's just such joy because he's Jesus the King. And yeah.
Yeah. Give it up for Kadeem. Thank you. That's good.
Wonderful. Isn't it great to hear someone's spiritual journey about how going from one place to another, journeying from there to here. And I don't know all of you here, and I'm not quite sure where you are on your spiritual journey, whether for some of you, you wouldn't say that maybe you've started yet, or maybe for some of you, you're just kind of inquiring, you kind of feel there's something out there, or maybe you've taken those first few steps of following Jesus, or you may have been on the spiritual journey for a while. And I think for each one of us this evening, there's something that God wants to say to us. So that's Kadeem's story, but what about our story? And what about the story of God's people here in the Bible? And their journey started with... Well, here's a bit about what happened, Exodus chapter 2. When they started their journey, it says here, the Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. And that was the start of their journey. They realized that the situation they were in, the slavery they were in, it wasn't doing them any good. In fact, they were hard-pressed, and even the Pharaoh there was trying to kill all their newborn baby sons. And they cried out to God. And that was, in some ways, that cry out to God. God, there must be more than this. That cry was the start of their spiritual journey. And we heard the start of Kadeem's spiritual journey, but here's just 3 things that I wonder for people here this evening. These things might be happening to you, or might have happened to you, that might be provoking you, even this evening, to start a spiritual journey. And I suppose the first thing that is here is a dissatisfaction with life. There's something about life that these people of God in slavery, life shouldn't be like this. And they were dissatisfied with slavery. They wanted freedom. And maybe there's some people here this evening, and if you were to take a good hard look at your life, you might think, well, do you know what? I'm slightly dissatisfied with what I've got. Maybe there are people who struggle with addictions, and maybe you're caught with gambling, or you're caught with alcohol or drugs, and there's something that actually you feel enslaved, and you'd love to break free. But you've tried under your own strength to break those addictions, but it just hasn't worked. And maybe this evening you think, if I could truly be free, I wonder if I could start that spiritual journey. Maybe there's some of you and you're struggling with guilt and shame and things that you've said and things you've done that have caused hurt to other people and somehow left its mark, and you're just dissatisfied. I wish something on the inside could change. I wish I could have not said those words, and I know that I can't travel back in time and change those words, but I just wish the feeling I've got inside would go away. I'm dissatisfied with carrying on living with the guilt and with the shame. For some people, a start of a spiritual journey is it's a new season in life. And sometimes new seasons in life provoke us to ask spiritual questions, provoke us to reassess our life. And for some of you as students, maybe you've come to Bristol, you're in your first year, and you're away from home, away from parents, away from things that are normal. And actually, with a change of a new season of life, there's new opportunities, there's new possibilities. But even within that, as you maybe experiment and try all kinds of stuff that's going on in university life, it may be that in this season of life, it could provoke spiritual questions. It could provoke you to think about the true meaning of life. Is it just about just getting my degree? Is it just about the fun and the enjoyment I can have while I'm here? Is it just about the relationships I can enjoy or use? Is that all there is? Or in this new season of life, does it provoke you to ask questions? I know sometimes for a parent, when someone's a parent for the first time and they hold their newborn child in their arms, it's like a new season of life. And as they look at this life that's now dependent on them, and just those kind of spiritual questions come back, kind of, where did this child come from? And well, we know where it came from, but kind of, this life that's here, this personality kind of, and maybe it provokes kind of spiritual questioning of, is there more to life? Who is this new person? And where did this kind of person kind of come from? And were they loved and intended by more than just kind of their parents? Maybe for some of us there's tragedy that strikes, and maybe it's a bereavement, and it's a death in the family, death of a close loved one, and somehow something has changed, and it's a different season of life. And in this season of life, kind of life that's been going on as normal, now there's a moment, now there's a question, now there's the possibility of a spiritual journey starting. And you may be here this evening and you might feel that actually you are in a new season of life, that you're here as at university or something has changed, and in this new season of life that maybe I'll start. Maybe like Kadeem, I can start a spiritual journey to find out there's something more about life. Just the third reason why I think people start on a spiritual journey is they're inspired by what they see and what they hear. I don't know if you saw in the newspaper or on the internet, on the news this week, about this lady. This lady here, Tracy Curtis Taylor. Next one. Gone. Technology. This lady here is going to fly from the UK to Australia in an open biplane. Have you seen this? She's going to fly solo, kind of below 1,000 feet, all the way from the UK, because she was inspired. She was inspired by Amy Johnson back in the 1930s, the first woman to fly solo from the UK to Australia. And that kind of inspired her growing up. And so she's going to go into this biplane, and she set off this week to fly to Australia. And her journey was inspired by somebody else. And I suppose that maybe for some of us that we see somebody, or we see their lives, or we see something about the quality, and maybe there's something about their life that we know we haven't got. And there's something about them that inspires us to question, inspires us to maybe go on a spiritual journey, inspires us to think, I wonder if the kind of life that they have, I wonder if I could have that. I don't claim to be a kind of a mass evangelist in sharing my faith, but those of you that are around your church will know that one of the kind of most formative things in my teenage years was being involved in quite a serious car accident. And we used to live in Norfolk, and we were coming back home, my mum and myself and my brother, along this narrow country lane from Norwich going back to Upton on the Norfolk Broads. November evening, pitch black. We came over the little brow of this little hill, and there was this lorry stalled across. And our kind of car went smack straight into the side and halved in size. And it was in kind of, I'm old, so you didn't have to wear safety belts in those days. It was before clunk, click every trip, if you remember that. And so when we hit this lorry, I was kind of catapulted straight through the windscreen, kind of left my leg behind broken, and my mum was badly injured, my brother was knocked unconscious. And we were trapped in the black and the dark. We ruptured the diesel tank full of about 40 gallons of diesel, which emptied all over my face, that was cut and bleeding. And we were trapped in this very dark, very desperate situation. And my brother was unconscious. I said to my mum, Mum, can we pray? And while we were there, she said a prayer, and she said amen and stopped. And I said, Mum, don't stop, because we had to wait for the ambulance to get there, and about half an hour before the fire brigade got there. I said, Mum, don't stop. And she said to me, well, Tim, why don't you pray? And as a 12-year-old, I thought, yeah. And I started praying. As I started praying, do you know what? There was just this amazing sense of peace that enveloped such a tragic situation, almost a tangible sense of peace. And the fire brigade came, and they cut us out of the wreckage and laid us on the side of the road, and they did a bit of triage before they put us into the ambulances, and we were taken to the hospital. And I was only there for a couple of weeks. My mum was in there for a couple of months, and a few weeks later, a 20-year-old lad came into the ward where my mother was with a bunch of grapes, and rather nervously went up to her and said, excuse me, were you the lady involved in the accident on the road from Norwich through to Acle? And she said, yes, I was. he said, I just wanted to come and just say what happened. He said, I'd kind of I've led a life, maybe not dissimilar to Kadeem, I've led a life and that wasn't very good. And I kind of had this question, God, are you there? And I'd prayed to God, and I'd given him lots of chances. I tried reading books, and it got to 3 weeks ago on Friday evening, and that morning I got up and said, God, you haven't answered my prayers. You kind of, I'm not going to believe in you. And then on the way back home, I was slightly late coming back from work, and I don't normally take that road, but I came by and I saw the accident, and I saw you and your son, and I saw your son on the road, and it was so black and there was so much blood, I didn't even know if he had a face left, but I could hear his voice, and he was praying, and he was praying to a God who was like a father to him. And I just knew then that there must be a God. And so I went to see my local vicar, and he helped me to become a Christian. And I just wanted to come and tell you that that's what happened. And there's something about, and I wasn't intending to be anything special. It was just in a time of crisis, I knew that God could help me. But there's something about a life that is open to God and genuinely loving him and serving him that other people think, do you know what, I'd like to have a little bit of that. And maybe you're somebody here this evening and you've just seen something in a student on your corridor, and you've moved here and you've just seen something in them that intrigues you. Or maybe you've got a work colleague and they're just somehow they're a bit different to you, and you know that they've got something you haven't got. And maybe it's inspiring you. Actually, it may even have inspired you to come here this evening. And that could be for you this evening just the start of a spiritual journey. You might be dissatisfied with life. You might be just in a new season that means you're asking questions. Or it may be that you've seen something or somebody and it's just inspired you to think, do you know what, there must be more to life than I've experienced so far. And if that's the case, then what happens in this story is they call out to God for help, and God acts. God does something. And God does something, and he sets them free from their oppression. And their spiritual journey starts. And for us, there's always a start to our spiritual journey. And the start is, well, I suppose the start is leaving. To start, you must leave. And if you want to go on a spiritual journey towards God, I suppose there's two things. You've got to leave behind where you are at the moment to take some steps into a different kind of future. And for some of you, it may be that you've got kind of all kinds of questions and you've got all kinds of doubts, and maybe you've been brought up with atheistic parents, and maybe the start is you've got to leave behind just a blanket, I'm not going to believe in God or Christianity at all. And you maybe need to leave that behind and just start with a question. I wonder if it could be true. I wonder if there's something about this Christian faith that, although I think that science has disproved it and Jesus wasn't a real person and all these kind of things, maybe just to switch off the cynical switch just for a moment and think, what if? What if I was to leave behind my cynicism, not leave behind my questions, but what if I could start? What if I could leave behind my sense of bitterness towards somebody that hurt you? What if I could leave behind those words that my parents kept on saying over me that have shaped my life? What if I could, and to start on a spiritual journey means to leave. And they left. But they didn't leave and just kind of wander aimlessly. They left with a destination in mind. Their destination was, they'd been promised a land of their own, a land that wasn't in Egypt where there was slavery, but a land that was where agriculture and where there was very fertile land, where they could grow crops and life would be good for them. There was a promised land that God was going to take them on a journey to find. And I suppose for us, the kind of starting a journey is leaving behind something, but realizing what you're traveling towards. And they were traveling towards, well, if you read through the story time and time again, when Moses asks Pharaoh to let his people go, he says this, let us go because we want to go and worship God. We want to go and encounter God. We want to take a few days' journey and offer sacrifices, and we want to worship God. Their destination was they wanted to go from a place of physical slavery to a place of encounter with God. And I suppose that's what the spiritual journey is I'm inviting you on this evening. It's not just a random kind of spiritual quest, because I believe that God has made each one of us. And he's made each one of us to know God, to love God, to worship God, to be with God. I believe that's why you're here. And in some ways, as you start your spiritual journey, to have a little inkling of where is it that this journey takes me. And if you read through the Bible story, you'll see that eventually this spiritual journey takes us through this physical life with its ups and downs, with its challenges, with its joys and its heartaches. And eventually takes us through death into a new heaven and a new earth where there's no more pain, no more tears, where we have such a close friendship and encounter with God that we're not going to need the sun anymore because his love just feels so real and vibrant. And that's the destination that we're heading towards. And we can get there not through our own human endeavor, but we get there because Jesus has done something. He's died on the cross and he's forgiven our past and opened a door wide to find God. Now, that might seem just a bit weird and a bit strange to you. But you probably think, there's more to life than this. It may not be that, but I know that there's a direction I want to head in. And when Jesus comes to this earth, he says, you've been trying to find the spiritual journey towards God. Well, I'm God. Come and follow me. If you wondered what kind of God is he, a kind God or a vengeful God? Is he mean and malicious? If you've seen me, Jesus says, you've seen what God's like. And in some ways, our spiritual journey is towards God, but we find God perfectly revealed in Jesus. And so to know and to understand, to ask questions about Jesus, that is the start of our spiritual journey. Which is why we run something in this church called Alpha. And you may have heard about it. It's run not just across this country, across every continent of the world. And it's to help people start that journey. To start that journey of asking questions, to start that journey of maybe putting aside cynicism, but bringing genuine questions you want answered to. Questions about, does God exist? And who was Jesus? And can you really trust the Bible? And what's the cross got to do with today? Wasn't that just a death 2,000 years ago? And there's all kinds of things in the Alpha course. You can come and you can start a spiritual journey. Ask those questions. There's a meal together. It's going to be an upstairs hall here. Then there's a talk that happens in this room here. You go into small groups. You can ask your questions, discuss things together. Starts at 7:30, finishes at 9:30. If you'd like to book in, either take one of these cards. You can go online. Use your phone now if you want to. Book online. Come along on Wednesday. It'll be a fantastic evening. And it could be the start of a spiritual journey, a bit like Kadeem, where you find truth and hope and forgiveness and love. But just before I finish, there's maybe some of you here this evening and you say, I've started that journey. What happened to the people when they started the journey? And for me, the journey continues. And as the journey continues, God will be with you and he does provide. As this spiritual journey that you're on, you may have started, the reality is this evening, whatever the next step is for you, God is with you and he will provide. It's interesting, in chapter 13 of Exodus, it says this about God's presence being with them. So it says this in Exodus chapter 13, by day the Lord went ahead of them with a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night a pillar of fire to give them light, so they could travel by day or night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. As they journeyed, the promise was God saying, I will be with you. I will be with you. It's not just a blind quest that we're going on. It's not just a hopeful spiritual journey that you have to fight through by yourself. Here, the people of God, as they travel from slavery to freedom, God says, I'm going to be with you. There was a little supernatural sign. As well as the supernatural sign of his presence, there was manna, which was this bread from heaven. And it's like, what sustains you on your spiritual journey? Well, God's word. It sustains you. It helps you, provokes you. My wife Bev was just saying this morning at community church, just a little story from this week. Her mum and her grandma both have breast cancer, so she has to have a mammogram quite regularly. And normally what she does, she has a mammogram, 2 weeks later a letter comes through saying, thank you very much, it's all clear. But this time she had a letter saying, we've done the mammogram, we want you to come to a follow-up appointment. And with the letter, there was this leaflet that says, it's going to be a follow-up appointment, allow an hour, you can have another x-ray, you can have an ultrasound, you'll see a consultant. Afterwards, there's the chance to speak to a counsellor. And so you can imagine in Bev's mind, anxiety levels kind of rose. And so the day came for the hospital visit, and she was just praying and saying, God, you know what? Just at the moment, there's a bit too much going on in life, and I could do without this, really. I could do without kind of, and she read, she said that prayer, then she's reading through the New Testament in the message, and with this fear, this anxiety, it was like these verses were like manna, were like spiritual bread for her on her journey. And it's from the book of Jude, which is not the normal book you might read, but she just got that far. And it says this, Jude, in the message. Jude, I am a slave to Jesus Christ and brother to James, writing to those loved by God the Father, called and kept safe by Jesus Christ. Relax. Everything will be all right. Rest. Everything's coming together. Open your heart. Love is on its way. And do you think that was helpful to her? It certainly was. It was like food that nourished her insides for that moment. And as we went for the appointment, she just kind of held on to that. God, I'm relaxing. I'm kind of, love is on its way. And unfortunately, it was just kind of the way, there was a mark on the x-ray, but it wasn't sinister, which was really good news. But the fear and the kind of, and needing to know, on this spiritual journey, I need some manna on the way. And God giving her through the word. And maybe for some of you this evening, as we come to a close, maybe you need to know this evening on your spiritual journey, God feeding you, God speaking to you, God nurturing you. And as these people journeyed through the wilderness and through the ups and downs, not only was God's presence with them, but God's word spoke to them. And if you feel you need a bit of encouragement at the moment, you feel there's a bit of a challenge, do you know what? Why don't you give God's word a go? There's manna from heaven. There's fresh bread that's here, daily bread for you to read and to receive. As they got thirsty, Moses struck a rock, and supernaturally there was water, refreshing water for them. And maybe as we come to pray in a moment, you're on that spiritual journey, and you've been trying to follow Jesus, but you know what? At the moment, it just feels dry. It feels hard. It feels a bit legalistic. It feels as though you're just going through the motions. And here on their spiritual journey, there was refreshing water. And in a moment, we're going to pray, because the God who you started off with is with you every step. The God that you can look back to and maybe say, I started that journey and I found that God's presence has been with me. And this evening, for this week, I need to know now God's presence with me here. That pillar of fire by night and that a pillar of cloud by day. And my belief is, and it's true, is that if now we come to God and say, God, I want to start that spiritual journey with you. I want to lay aside, leave behind the past and journey into the adventure of what the possibilities are with you. Then tonight as we pray, you might want to do that. You may want to commit to going on to this Alpha course. But it may be in that continuing the spiritual journey, that listening to his word, being open to his spirit. Actually, do you know what? It's really helpful to be with other people. Because when you're with other people, your journey isn't so isolating. And I think in some ways that's what Chris is hoping to do with the students this term, is that actually how can we go on a journey together? Do you want to just say, Chris, about what you're hoping to see as students kind of continue that journey?
Yeah, sure. So something we're starting off this term that we just started planning this week is kind of going through a series of experiments, basically. And the aim here is that we try and take on new spiritual practices for a short time to just try them out. So maybe things like fasting, maybe things like solitude, maybe things like kind of giving and engaging with the poor. And we try those out for a little bit of time in order to see what we find of God there and what we meet with of him in that place. Because, yeah, I guess, as Tim's been saying, there's that real awareness that our spiritual journey hasn't finished and that just there's so much more that God has for us. So, yeah, that's our plan for the term. If you're a student, come and get involved, and you'll hear much more about that as we go on. But, yeah.
Right. Is that Tuesday evenings, Pastorate? Yeah. Tuesday evenings, so do find out more from Chris. But we can take a chance to pray. And as we come to pray, maybe for some of you, you realize that you'd like to start on a spiritual journey towards God, towards the possibility of finding new life. Maybe for some of you at the moment that you're feeling disappointed, disillusioned with life, with its struggles, with its addictions, and you'd love to be free. Maybe some of you, there's just a new phase of life, and that new phase of life has just stirred up questions. Maybe you've seen somebody that's inspired you by what you've seen, what you've heard. I just want to pray now in the quietness that you'd say a prayer to God, and it'd be a prayer to God, say, God, I want to move towards you. I want to move towards you, God. I don't know kind of what you're like and what this is going to happen, but actually I know there needs to be a spiritual journey, that I'm moving towards something and away from something. Maybe some of you who've made that choice in the past, and just now you want to say, for this next step, God, I need you to provide. I need you to speak. I need you to refresh. I need you to reassure me that your presence is with me. And maybe your prayer can be to God, say, God, for this next step, will you help me? God, for this next step, will you be with me? Will you inspire me once again with the destination of being like Jesus, fixing my eyes on him? Lord, we say that we need you. In Jesus' name, amen.